There were many acts of resistance carried out within Germany and those lands occupied by the Nazis. Many of those who found themselves living under Nazi occupation hated it during the Second World War, and because of this they involved themselves in organised acts of defiance. For example, the French resistance, but when the Germans and Nazis often discovered resistors, they were dealt with brutally in horrific ways. The Gestapo would administer brutal torture to gain as much information as they could, but often public executions were ordered and carried out against those who went against the occupation. The point of this was to make sure that the other people living inside of the country did not also defy and carry out acts of sabotage. Civilians were even encouraged to speak to the Gestapo and other police agencies about those who they suspected went against the beliefs of Hitler and the Nazis. There were in the Balkan states a number of resistance groups that emerged, and the most successful was the Partisans. Today we look at the execution of a partisan who was executed in public, but the images of his execution were some of the most powerful of the Second World War, with Stjepan Filipovic standing with his arms aloft and a noose around his neck. Remember to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Stjepan Filipovic was born on the 27th of January 1916 in Opuzan, which is found today in modern-day Croatia. His family moved throughout Yugoslavia, and Stjepan as a young man lived in a number of different cities. He studied to become a locksmith inside of Kragujevac, and he also learned electrical wiring and carpentry. In 1937 he became involved in local labour movements and political activism, joining a number of groups. Because of his actions he was later arrested and was sentenced to a year in prison in 1939. After he left prison, he remained a political activist and he joined the Communist Party of Yugoslavia. But within a few years, the German army rampaged across to Yugoslavia. The Yugoslav army was quickly overwhelmed by the Germans, and despite putting up a fight, there was nothing they could do. Because Yugoslavia was now under German occupation, many members of the civilian population took up arms and defied the occupiers. The invasion of Yugoslavia was brutal, and Germany attacked from all sides, and they were helped out by the Italians and the Hungarians, who made up the Axis alliance. They attacked the capital Belgrade and carried out a number of bombing raids, with the Luftwaffe destroying large parts of the city. The invasion did not last long, and within 10 days, the Royal Yugoslav Army announced it had surrendered after being overwhelmed by the Axis forces. Their poor training and lack of equipment and resources could not take on the German war machine, but inside the country there were pockets of defiance which later rose up to become more significant. Many people refused to fight and bear arms against the Germans, and instead treated them as liberators who they believed would free them from government oppression. But two resistance groups emerged, the Partisans and the Chetniks. When the Germans invaded Yugoslavia, Stjepan Filipovic was inside the city of Valjevo, and he then in 1941 joined the Kolubara soldiers of the Valjevo Partisan detachment. These were a communist resistance group, and they were viewed as the enemies of the Nazis, and Filipovic rose inside the Partisans significantly. He was seen as a skilled leader, and he was made a commander before being transferred across to the Tamnavsko-Kolubarski unit in Valjevo. He served with this unit and was involved in recruiting more men and women to join the Partisans and the resistance, as well as making sure they had enough supplies, food, weapons, ammunition, and other equipment to carry out acts of sabotage. But for the Partisans, they also had to contend with another resistance group who were seen as their rivals, the Chetniks. The two groups had very different ideas and wished to go about their resistance in a number of different ways. Despite going against the Nazis, the Chetniks were originally made up of ethnic Serb Yugoslav soldiers who managed to escape the Axis army's capture. They fled to the hills of Bosnia, Montenegro and Serbia and were led by Dragojub Mihailovic. The Chetnik numbers did rise when Serbian peasants who fled from Croatia after the invasion joined them, but they did not allow non-Serbs to join the ranks. The Chetniks were more conservative and feared reprisals more by the German army, and they tended to worry about what the German occupiers would do in retaliation for their actions. The Germans were known for carrying out a policy of ordering 100 killings and executions of civilians for every one German soldier killed by resistors. They were more cautious, and because of this, attracted criticism and conflict from the Partisans. The Partisans were led by Josip Broz Tito, and their sole goal was to get rid of the Axis and German occupation. They then wished to create an independent socialist Yugoslav state, which would be established after freeing the civilian population from occupation. They favoured much offensive action and direct action against the Germans, and they included all ethnic groups, and because of this, attracted criticism from the Chetniks. They were rivals despite wanting to end the occupation. It was inside of a partisan detachment and unit that Stjepan Filipovic became a commander, but he was captured in action on the 24th of December 1941. He wasn't captured by the Germans, but instead was captured by the Chetniks. They then handed him over to the Gestapo, who interrogated him in the headquarters in Belgrade. Whilst being tortured and questioned, Filipovic refused to give over any information at all, and because of this, the Gestapo marked his file as an impossible case. His file was marked with a red pen, meaning he was a lost cause, and with this was sentenced to death. Stjepan Filipovic was brought into the streets of Valjevo in front of a huge crowd. He was dragged through the central streets of the city, shouting defiant statements against the Nazis and his executioners. He screamed, "Long live the liberators of the people, down with the racists and the collaborators, and long live communism." Hearing this, more people were brought out from their homes to watch the proceedings, and Filipovic was then taken into the square inside of the town. He arrived where some gallows had been created in the centre of the square. Underneath the wooden gallows was a bench, and Filipovic was told to stand upon the bench to await his death. As he stood there over the crowd, a noose had been made from a thin wire and rope, and it was fastened around his neck and tightened. As the noose was around his neck, he cried out to the crowd, "What are you waiting for? Why are you allowing this? Grab those rusty rifles and free your country from this scum. Long live our liberating army, death to fascism, freedom to the people." His attempts to incite the crowd were in vain. As soldiers approached him, he tried to kick one of them, and then a soldier punched him in the face. He tried to strike back, and as this happened he slipped off the bench, and the noose then tightened around his neck, and very slowly in front of a huge crowd, Filipovic strangled to death. But a photograph had been taken of the moments, and because of this the images of Filipovic standing defiantly, with his arms held aloft with the noose around his neck, became iconic. The photograph was hidden, as the Germans were worried about the propaganda and publicity generated by it. Only one copy remained, where it was held by a local doctor who gained the trust of the Germans, and he then released the photograph to the rest of the world. The iconic image of Stjepan Filipovic today is commemorated in Valjevo, where a huge statue stands as a commemoration of his bravery and defiance in the face of his death and the Nazis. As he stood on the gallows, he wished for an end of the Nazi occupation, and he tried to rally those within the city he was greatly fond of. He's seen today as a heroic symbol of defiance and opposition to one of history's most evil regimes. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.